Over the past couple of years, we've realized some tremendous losses in our community, particularly among those from the greatest generation. Eleanor Wadsworth, reported to be the last living female World War II pilot, died at 103 years old. Bradford Freeman, the last living member of Easy Company, 506 Infantry, 101st, as portrayed on HBO's Band of Brothers, died at 97. Herschel Woody Williams, the last remaining Medal of Honor recipient of World War II, an Iwo Jima hero, died at 98. We finally reached that point on the timeline where members of the greatest generation are dwindling, and they're dwindling fast. 234 of them every day, according to the Department of Veteran Affairs. The VA also reported in 2021 that just over 240,000 of the 16 million Americans who served in World War II were still alive. That's down from an approximate 330,000 World War II veterans who were alive in 2020. The same report projects that by 2033, there won't be any veterans left alive from the greatest generation. Frankly, I think that's a little optimistic. The US got involved in the Second World War in December of 41. War lasted until 45. Let's say that the youngest possible enlistees lied about their age, which many of them did to make the tail end of the fight, right? So we'll figure 14 years old in 1945 means they were born in 1931, means they'll be 102 in 2033. Washington Post is even more optimistic, however. They estimate that the last members of the greatest generation, born in 1927, also 14 when the US got involved, will die around the year 2046 at 119 years old. Granted, the Washington Post took into account advances in healthcare and longer life expectancy, but when the fuck did they do this study? After watching Demolition Man for the first time in '93? I hope the Post sees this and calls me up. What's your boggle, Jamie Goldstein? Not too many centenarians running around, that's my point. The greatest men and women that this country has ever seen will more than likely be gone in less than a decade. And I'm sad about it. We're losing the men and women who effectively preserved the free world and rebuilt our nation from the ground up, only for their kids to grind it to an almost halt. Boomers, right? In losing these people who accomplished these things, we're losing the people who developed the blueprints for how to do so. And we may need those blueprints once again, if not already. When you look at the State of Union from a 40,000-foot view, there are a lot of similarities between now and the days in which the greatest generation grew up. Similar to the 1930s, the early 2000s were also heavily shaped and even defined by economic crisis. Similar to the early 30s, the 2000s saw a strangely powerful rise in populist, some might even say authoritarian views. Not a jab at the right in general, or conservatives in particular. We need the right to keep the left in check. It's the hallmark of our two-party system. Look, if it weren't for conservatives, our Second Amendment right might not stand. Our businesses might be overregulated right into closure. And we might have more government involvement in areas where we don't need it. No, I'm talking about far-right extremists. I'm talking about elected representatives who have argued that Muslims have no place in government. I'm talking about members of Congress who have invited Holocaust deniers to the State of the Union address. I'm talking about running for the highest office in the land while blatantly refusing to denounce white extremist groups, such as the Proud Boys and Oath Keepers. And similar to the 1930s, the early aughts saw a spike in these leaders using nationalist language and fear-mongering to divide the nation and keep us fighting one another while they till the soil for the seeds of totalitarianism. And now, the aforementioned ongoings, which bear striking resemblance to the issues faced by the greatest generation, are coming to an absolute apex, just as the collective crises of the 20s and 30s came to a head in the form of World War II. The greatest generation solved a number of their issues through military action, sure, but then they went home. They went home and they worked together to build the foundation of what would become one of the strongest economies the world has ever seen. They worked together to build one of the greatest national infrastructures of their time. They went home and they built our nation into the start of what could easily have endured as a beacon of democracy for the rest of the world. Do you see the next 20 years playing out the same way? Because I don't. We can't get through a crack in a pipeline without people panic buying gasoline until the gas stations run dry. We can't get through a global contagion without people politicizing PPE and hoarding toilet paper and milk. We have lost our collective minds, and we are teaching our youngest generation to do the same. Franklin Roosevelt once said, "There is a mysterious cycle in human events. To some generations, much is given. Of other generations, much is expected. This generation of Americans has a rendezvous with destiny." If you ever served in the 101st, you know the significance of that statement. So what's our destiny? And when is our rendezvous? What will be the most monumental event our youngest generation faces? Civil war, or a new order of unity? An age of enlightened thinking, or a dark landscape of partisanship and unprecedented political and civil gridlock? I don't know. But if we continue to boil issues down to which side had the idea or what the Bible says, if we continue to speak the mindless language of rhetoric and limit our dialogue to strings of buzzwords that have more implication than they do actual meaning, then we will not endure. We will lose the greatest generation. Can't negotiate with time. But the greatest generation has a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to be reincarnated. Gen X and the millennials just fought a generational war, have lived through a great recession, and are the first generations to be born and raised in the digital world. It's our turn to write a few chapters in our nation's history and move a little closer to that rendezvous with destiny. Let's make sure that the chapters we write end up being brilliant segues into the future, rather than the final chapter in the great American saga. Good night.
What's going on, guys? If you like that, click this link here to watch more. If you're ready to subscribe and keep us in business, click on this link here. And you know the Selective Service is coming back. I don't want to keep my day job, so subscribe.